Hello, my name is Rachael Jordan, and welcome to the quick guide to conducting peer review in your class. So why peer review? Peer review can actually be a time-saving strategy for you by having students give each other feedback. Also, it can result in genuine revision if you structure the sessions and train students in what to do. First, you have to decide which philosophy of peer review you think works best for your teaching style, and I'll be discussing those shortly. Second, you need to decide how students will be exchanging drafts. Some prefer that their students read their papers out loud. Others prefer for students to exchange their drafts prior to class, and yet others have their students bring copies to the physical classroom. So what are the philosophies of peer review? The first is response-centered reviews. Response-centered reviews are process-oriented, and they're pretty non-intrusive because it places maximum responsibility on the writer for making decisions about what to change. What you do is in groups, you'd have students exchange their papers. Each student will explain to the writer what he or she didn't like, what worked and what didn't work, and what was confusing. The group members aren't giving advice. They're simply describing their personal responses to the draft as it's written. What the writer does is take notes on the responses, and this leaves the writer responsible for deciding what to do next. Another approach is advice-centered reviews. This approach is product-oriented and it's pretty directive. Peer reviewers collaborate to give advice to the writer. So this works best when students know what the assignment is requiring and kind of have an internalized criteria for what they're supposed to be looking at, either through norming sessions or your provided scoring guides. An option for running this kind of peer review is to divide the class into pairs, have them exchange papers, and respond to one another. Now, if you leave students to their own devices, these responses might not be very strong, so I suggest having some sort of checklist or peer review sheet. Because this method takes a little bit longer, students can read each other's papers before coming to class and use class time to write out their critiques. If peer review doesn't sound like something you'd want to do during class time, you can also utilize the advice-centered reviews outside of class. You can divide the class into pairs and have them exchange drafts with another pair. What happens then is each pair meets outside of class to conduct peer review, and they return the reviews the following day in class. But how do we make the students actually hold effective student peer review? First, don't expect students to give stylistic feedback. They're not that nuanced yet. They should be responding to each other's ideas and possibly organization. Students will be able to know when they get confused reading or where they don't understand something, and that's valuable feedback to the writer. You can also train students to engage each other at the level of ideas. What is the other writer's thinking like? Do they understand their argument or their topic? If they're talking to each other about their ideas, they're a lot more confident than trying to talk to each other about things such as grammar. Also, train students to back up comments with specific examples from the draft. Rather than stars and smiley faces or nice intro, students should give specific examples. Why is the intro nice? What was effective about it? If you said, great point, what do you mean? Is it a great point because it's backed up by evidence? They may not have this language, so showing them examples or doing an in-class peer review sample is helpful. There's also a variety of technology available to you to assist with peer review. Anything from having students leave each other comments in Word, all the way to using VoiceThread for peer review. This is one of my favorites because it can be done outside of class. Students can upload a VoiceThread in which they're reading their own paper, and then other students can comment on that VoiceThread with their own voice or video feed responding to the student's writing. This is especially helpful in online classes to get students face-to-face interaction with one another that doesn't necessarily have to happen in the classroom. A few reminders about peer review. Students should peer review early on in the writing stage. A first draft is a great time to have them bounce their ideas off of one another. Also, students can peer review small portions of the paper. It doesn't have to be the whole thing. Maybe you'll carve 20 minutes out of class to look at each other's introductions or conclusions or a body paragraph they're struggling with. Lastly, doing a sample peer review as a whole class is very, very valuable, showing students and modeling for students the kind of feedback they need to give one another.